Greetings and salutations. Today we'll be going over a brief history of the Spanish-American War. Part 1. Setting the scene. After over 10 years of battle in Cuba between Cuban revolutionaries and the Spanish, Americans have heard about the atrocities committed in Cuba. Valerino Weyler, a high-ranking Spanish official, started moving Cubans from the western part of the country to the eastern part of the country in so-called protected towns. These protected towns were later to be discovered as concentration camps of sorts, where people were beaten, tortured, starved, and lived in very unsanitary conditions, where over 170,000 Cubans died in a span of only 6 months. When Americans heard about these atrocities, they were outraged. They called for war and annexation of Cuba. President McKinley did not want war at the time, so he then made the Teller Amendment, which was demanding that Spain leaves Cuba and Cubans receive independence, which was later rejected. McKinley then decided to send the USS Maine, an American warship, to Havana in Cuba. He did this to safely evacuate American citizens so they would not be thrown into concentration camps as well. Part 2. The start of the war. On February 15, 1898, the USS Maine, on the way to Havana, mysteriously sunk. All fingers pointed towards Spain, and the American public was outraged. Over 260 American citizens were killed during this explosion. The U.S. then decides to send more ships, resulting in a naval blockade around Cuba. This resulted in the Spanish declaring war on April 23rd in 1898. Swiftly after the declaration of war, Americans land at Manila Bay in the Philippines. Whilst the Americans were outnumbered by 4 ships, Americans having 9 and the Spanish having 13, the Americans won the battle in only 6 hours due to the Spanish being technologically inferior, still using wooden ships and using guns that were firing way out of range. After capturing Manila Bay, the United States turned their eyes towards Guam. The USS Charleston was the only ship that landed at Guam. They fired 13 warning shots. The Spanish, thinking this was a salute, not even knowing that the war started, proceeded to try to load their guns. However, they discovered that they had no ammunition whatsoever. The Spanish were taken prisoners of war and there was no casualties on either side. On June 6, 1898, the Americans planned an invasion for Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. The Americans, already having a strong naval blockade, surrounded the island. 3 Spanish ships, however, tried to counter them and destroy the American ships. However, the Americans swiftly defeated them. This victory was mainly decided by the Spanish having less superior ships. Their guns were out of range and they were running out of ammunition very quickly. After winning the naval battle, 650 Marines landed on Guantanamo Bay. On the same day, Americans created the camp called Camp McCalla. 5 days after creating the camp, the Spanish caught Americans off guard and launched a surprise attack, where they would be wearing camouflage and hiding out in bushes. The Spanish could not advance towards the camp because of the USS Dolphin, a gunship docked shortly outside of the camp that was raining fire on the Spanish. Cuban revolutionaries arrived and aided the Americans, which made the Spanish retreat. Then the Cubans and Americans pushed towards Santiago and had 2 objectives. The first one would to be take El Caney, and the second to take San Juan Hill. They planned to do this simultaneously. July 1st, 1898, El Caney was captured in only 12 hours. However, it was a great loss for the Americans. Both thousands of them died and only a few hundred Spanish soldiers died. The remaining Americans marched towards San Juan Hill, whilst 8,000 American and Cuban troops sprinted up San Juan Hill. 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers, as well as Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders, charged Kettle Hill, another Spanish stronghold that was north of San Juan Hill. Kettle Hill was captured, but there was many casualties on both sides. Spanish attempted to counterattack with 600 retreating soldiers from San Juan Hill. All but 40 of them were killed via American Gatling guns that were now set up on Kettle Hill. On July 3, 1898, 6 Spanish ships approached American ships outside of Santiago, but they were quickly destroyed. On July 17th, the Spanish Toral surrendered Santiago to the Americans as a result of this defeat. Small proxy battles were fought all over Cuba, and it was a big standstill for both sides. Americans decided to pull out of Cuba for the time and move their eyes to Puerto Rico. On July 25th, several battles were fought with little casualties and only a small change in territory. Part 3. The Aftermath. On August 12th, the Protocol of Peace was signed and the war was over. The only thing left was territory disputes. This document ended all real fighting for both sides. Part of the Philippines that Spain still had was Intramuros. With pressure from Filipino revolutionaries causing chaos after the war, the Americans and the Spanish decided to make a mock battle on August 13th. Both sides fired with the goal of no unnecessary damage or death, and the Spanish, as planned, retreated. This eased the Filipino revolutionaries who wanted the Spanish dead or out. Now that the war was finally and totally over, the Treaty of Paris was signed in December. Both leaders from Spain and the USA decided on Spain gaining $20 million from America, and America gaining the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam. The Spanish were humiliated at the end of this war. The Spanish fought this war for the sole reason so the Spanish public did not see their empire give in to a rising nation, believing it will cause a bigger revolution that will be much more costly than the war. In the end, the roles reversed on the global stage. Spain now had to work on developing as a country on its homeland, and America had to focus on expansion overseas. I hope you guys enjoyed my video. Have a great day.